Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, welcome to the third in the series of...
Are you muted?
Can you hear me? Yes? Welcome to the third in the series of Open Educational Resources webinar for African libraries. It is organized by AfLIA in collaboration with OER Africa, with the aim to ensure the development and use of open educational resources in Africa towards enhanced teaching and learning. Yes, for formal education and for those who are involved in distance learning. The webinar was designed to run in 3 parts. We have been able to achieve the first, which introduced us to what OER is. And it was facilitated by Nebocha and moderated by Intabisen. That one provided us with the idea of what is in public domain, which is usually copyrighted with Creative Commons, and then the restricted area. And we went further to the second webinar, which is Introduction to Open Access Publishing, telling us how these open educational resources are published. And now today, we are going to look at how it affects the librarians, how it affects me and you, because we are the curators, we are the managers of resources. No matter how effective or qualitative a resource is, it can only be meaningful if it can reach the user, and the librarians are there to do that. So if the resources are open, what is the implication to the librarians? And we have very qualitative person to do it today. That is Kirsty von Gogh. Kirsty von Gogh is quite experienced in OER because he worked with OER Africa. But then, before he joined OER Africa, he was a project manager in Nebocha. But before joining Nebocha, he worked in educational publishing, producing print and digital titles for Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland, and Namibia. She has extensive experience publishing print texts and resource materials for the schools, curricula across grades and subjects. Kirsty has also commissioned and produced digital assessment materials and interactive content for the South African schools market. Kirsty's current work is focused on early literacy and open licensing for a project funded by William and Flora Howard Foundation. She is quite experienced, and she will be in position to tell us what we need to do. Now that we have, it is not an academic gimmicks. It is for us to get this knowledge, get this skill, apply it. And she is in position. I hereby welcome Kirsty von Gogh. My name is Dr. Chinwe Agnobi, moderator. Welcome, Kirsty.
Hi, it's nice to be here. I'm slightly uncomfortable on video, but I hope it helps all of you, and I hope you can all see my presentation. Thank you so much for that introduction. So I'm actually sitting in the office, and I'm assisting on this OER Africa webinar but I'm actually a project manager at Neil Butcher and Associates, and OER Africa is one of the projects we're working on. So today I'm going to be talking about the implications of openly licensed resources for librarians, particularly librarians in Africa and based at universities. All of our presentations are available on the OER Africa website, so you're welcome to go and have a look. I will put up the link a little bit later so that you can all access everything that we've shared with you in this series. So, sorry, I'm just trying to. Why would universities choose open? Why, like, what leads us to choosing open? So we know there's the rising cost of textbooks, of education, just tuition costs, housing and transport. This leads to limited funds available to students. And then this leads to, we've found, faculty engaging with open content just because they need other resources and they can't rely on commercially available resources only anymore. We found that courses change, so there are more and more like OER courses available, more free courses, more openly accessible courses. And then pedagogies evolve because now we're using digital tools. That's how we're getting the content to students. And then the open pedagogies, which engage students as creators of information rather than having them just consume the information. So we found that some of the benefits of adopting OERs are this wider adoption leads to this use of new pedagogies like open pedagogies. The faculty becomes more open to sharing their work, which obviously is going to benefit more people. And then we have a higher availability of authentic, high quality African resources, which is what ideally we want. And Neil touched on that in the first webinar, why we think it would be important to have this. Some people may be hesitant to adopt OERs, and some of the issues of concern, which will kind of be discussed in my presentation, are issues of copyright. So are we using other people's material when we shouldn't be? Is it being used incorrectly?
Kirsty,
do you like...
Tony here.
Sorry.
We're not seeing your presentation, we're only seeing you.
What? Sorry, I've shared my screen.
We're seeing you on the camera, but not the presentation.
So is that better?
Yes,
That's
you
fine.
can go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine. We're seeing it and the small picture of you. Thank you.
Okay. Should I go back at all?
Yes. Please start again.
Start again. Oh, sorry about that.
Yes.
Okay. So here's from the start. Why would universities choose open pedagogies? So I've just listed the high costs and why there's limited funds available to assist students. This leads to faculty engaging with open content. So now people are trying out OERs. There's open access, which Liz and Tony went into great detail about 2 weeks ago. And this leads to courses changing. So we've got more OER courses. There's different ways of courses being presented. So there'll be OERs used in some courses are only online. And there's a lot, like obviously a lot more digital content. This means that pedagogies evolve. So there's, with the use of digital tools, different pedagogies are being used. I just have to. So some of the benefits of adopting OERs are this wider adoption leads to new pedagogies such as open pedagogies are engaging students as creators of information rather than just consumers, which is creating more content and more information that's available to be used and shared. Faculty become more open to sharing their work because they're seeing other work shared and are realizing that this also a different way of working and what we, what ideally people want to be doing with open education resources. And then there's the availability of authentic, high quality African resources. So we are seeing more content available because more people are creating content with the adoption of OERs. Some of the issues of concern, so this could be why some universities or faculty or anybody in the system may not want to adopt OERs. So that OERs, sorry, I've just realized I'm assuming everybody knows what they are. It's open education resources. And like I said, Neil gave us all the information on that in the first webinar. And I will provide the link for the slides later. So people are concerned that they are going to have their work plagiarized. There's concerns about using other people's work incorrectly, so copyright concerns. People have difficulty finding or creating OERs for their subject level, or so they don't actually know where to find them. So it leads people to be a bit hesitant. Sometimes people don't have the skills to find or create the OER. People don't have enough time. There's, faculty has enough work to do running their courses and like with marking and everything that people have to do. So they might not have time for something that they see as extra. And then the last thing is that I think could be an issue is that people are reluctant to have others modify or use their work. And this is just that people may not understand how the licenses work. So the requirements that a university needs for like proper OER adoption, Neil discussed the access to technology and infrastructure. So that means that people need access to digital tools, to hardware, and obviously usually a really good internet connection. And this needs to be facilitated by the university a lot of the time. Policies and strategies to adopt OER are not always in existence. So universities need to put these in place. Librarians need to be trained to find and use resources. So hopefully we can help with some of that, but we at least need to point librarians in the right way, as they're going to be guiding the faculty on how to do this. We also need like the support needed for faculty and librarians. They need funding, they need time, they need recognition about their efforts in like promoting OER and using OERs. And essentially just giving legitimacy to OER. It's not an extra or whatever, it's a really important resource or set of resources that we can use, so it's not kind of overlooked and just not really considered. So what I think is that as librarians, your key role when it comes to OERs is actually being this almost the curators of the knowledge around OERs. So essentially, librarians can promote OERs at universities. They can introduce faculty and students to OERs, and I'll explain ways of doing that. They can train users on OER access and use, so that's faculty and students. They can facilitate access, assist with converting courses to OER courses, and then become a champion of OER policy development and implementation, because librarians are well situated to understand all these aspects. And then I'll discuss all of these now. So how would you introduce faculty and students to openly licensed resources? You can do this in a number of ways, like through internal communications. You can have workshops. You can use the intranet to share either news or resources. LibGuides are an excellent way of doing this. I've found really great LibGuides on basically pulling together all the information about the subjects. I'm sure most of you would know how to use a LibGuide, and I'll show you an example of a really great one on open education resources now. And then your e-learning portal. So this is a place where people can upload their own OER content, and I think that's really useful for actually sharing OERs and really getting faculty to take ownership and engage in the process. Here's the LibGuide for OERs for the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. It's set up by Denise Nicholson, who is one of the librarians. Anyway, so you can have a look, and she's got a lot of information up on her page. And you can see that there's like OERs by topic, the resources, how to search for OERs. Anyway, there's a lot of information, and I do provide this link at the end of my presentation. How can librarians facilitate access to and understanding of OERs? So librarians are in a position to be able to teach faculty and students about Creative Commons licenses. Neil discussed these in quite a lot of detail in the first presentation. Librarians can show faculty and students how to search for OER. Liz and Tony explained how to find OERs, open access journals, which is really helpful as well. That was in the webinar 2 weeks ago. You can compile and maintain lists of OER referral sites. And so that would be the compiling list. So we've obviously know there are lots of places to find OERs. There isn't just one place, and librarians are able to kind of curate this information and put it together. And then librarians are also able to curate institutional OER content to maximize discoverability. So this is where librarians would be able to tag and update the metadata and make sure that people can find the content that is created in their organization. I do want to note that the task of actually putting together an OER course or converting a course to an OER can be really difficult. So it's not expected that everybody will convert a whole course, but librarians can assist with doing this. So they can check copyright and maybe like just make users aware of the issues, which you have learned about in the first webinar, and Liz and Tony also mentioned it. Essentially, I think librarians need to know that it's not their job to make faculty convert to 100% OER. You're not going to ever be able to list all the OER content that exists, because this is obviously growing. Everything's on different repositories and in different spaces, but you can learn how to search for it, and you can also teach people how to search for this. 2 hours a week of time is not going to be enough for this. It's like facilitating access to OER is actually quite a big job. So it's not just an extension of what librarians do, which I think is key to understanding, and also what your institutions need to understand. This page shows some of the all the Creative Commons licenses. It's just an example of what can and can't be done with each license. So I know Neil went into great detail about everything. So we've got this CC BY license, which is an attribution license, which is the most open license. So you can use, if somebody is publishing under this license, they can people can copy and republish They can use it for commercial use. It can be adapted, and you can change the license. The next license, well, I'm actually not going to go through all of them, but anyway, you can see the most restrictive license is the CC by NCND. So that's if people don't want their work modified. So it's one of the concerns, if somebody doesn't want their work modified, there is still an open license that can be used for that. There's a lot more detail, like I said, in Neil's presentation, and at the end of my presentation, I've got lots of resources if anybody needs to know more. This is another resource that is available on the OER Africa website. It's a tutorial, and it's about finding open content. So this is really useful for librarians to learn how to find open content. You can see it teaches you where to find, teaches you about the resources. It shows where you can find OERs, it teaches you about MOOCs, teaches about searching, and it's free and you don't have to register for it. So I would definitely encourage you to go and have a look at that. Like I said, it's available at the end of my presentation. There are links for it. So OER management. This is how librarians can manage OERs. They'll be able to assist with intellectual property rights, because librarians are well situated to understand these concepts, and they can ensure that an OER course or some of the resources that are created don't infringe on copyrights and don't use copyright protected material, and also to show people which licenses they can license their work under, depending on what they require. Librarians are able to provide appropriate tagging, metadata, and resource descriptions to be able to make the content discoverable. You would best know what people are looking for and how they'll go about finding it. And also, once you've searched for it, I think you'll have a better understanding of what kind of metadata and tagging resources will require from your institutions. And then you can archive OERs in a university repository. And this is quite an important point, using a file format that allows adaptation where this is something you want to do. Rather than kind of having a PDF that maybe somebody can't adapt. Another point that I'd like to make is that we can make African research more visible. This actually talks more to the open access journals, but it can also be relevant for OERs by sharing this beyond your institutional repositories. So you'll be aware of repositories where you will find the content, where you'll find OERs and content, and so you'll be able to point faculty in the right direction to share their content and be able to make this African content more available to the global OER network. So I've got a point about quality assurance. And I want to say, I know that the role of the librarian is not to quality assure everybody's OER content, but we know that you're going to get questions about it, and I've seen in all the webinars that people are asking questions about quality assurance. So there are some things that I feel like I would direct to librarians to point you in the right direction. You can guide faculty and students when they ask about quality assurance. You can guide them to use sites that have quality assurance processes, like OER Africa. I'll show you some sites that do quality assure content. You can also, you can also direct them to tools and resources to assess quality. So some people have created rubrics to assess the quality of OERs, and these might be quite useful for faculty. Essentially, only faculty can determine the quality of the OERs that they use. So like I said, it's not the librarians that are determining the quality, it is faculty that's doing so. And then I think quality needs to be at least equal to what is commercially available, because you don't want to be substituting content that people would normally be using for content that is not as useful or not as good for the students, just to save money. It's the OER Africa site, which has obviously a lot of content for you. The link is at the end of this presentation. But anyway, so OER Africa has their content, and they've got their own quality assurance processes. There's the Merlot repository as well, which has quite a lot of material, and you can search for courses and you can create material on here. And then there's OER Commons, which is also quite useful. I would suggest trying these out, having a look at them, seeing how the sites work, and then being able to point students and staff in the direction of these sites if they are looking to use OER content. So the whole idea around OERs is a lot of people think we're saving a lot of money, and this is a way to create content so students don't have to buy textbooks or other, things like that. That's not, that's not the only reason, but there are a lot of unrecognized costs, and it's not just cost to librarians. The costs I've listed here are for the institutions that are not always factored in. So we know people think about technology costs and infrastructure costs. So having a stable internet connection is obviously a cost that most people would consider, but I feel like a lot of costs are not always considered, and I think they're just useful to be aware of. So the advocacy work this is a lot of the librarians' time, would be advocacy work with university leadership, faculty and students on promoting OER use. The librarians' time spent supporting faculty and students, all the things I just described to you, introducing them to OERs, managing the OER content, teaching them how to understand Creative Commons licenses. I mentioned in the beginning that students should be creating content. The students might be creating content and it's available as an OER, and this is not a cost that's always considered by the university. And then I've put in instructional design costs, because these costs would be important if faculty want to change their courses over to an OER. They may need to be retrained in how to do this, because obviously there's it's different pedagogies again, and these are just things that universities might need to be aware of. That's strange. So these are the cost factors that I think need to be considered overall for the whole institution, and a lot of them apply to the librarians. And essentially what we see here is that what is required of librarians actually costs money when you want to consider OERs. There's like funding and time necessary for librarians and for faculty. So cost factors that should be considered are developing policies, implementing strategies, planning to implement OERs. Like I said, training librarians and faculty, training librarians on where to find OERs, training faculty on where to find them, how to create these things. Technology and infrastructure, obviously, I keep mentioning. The creation and adaptation of resources, uploading resources, because these are usually stored as digital assets and digital content. Somebody needs to be doing the physical work of uploading everything. And then we also have hosting costs, because you'll have spaces where you'll need to actually store a lot of resources. So people need to consider how they want to do this. And then this last point comes a lot down to the librarian's time, managing the university OER content, assisting with copyright clearance and licensing issues. curating the content and tagging it for to be discoverable, because that's really important. Otherwise, you know, a lot of content's created, and if nobody can find it, nobody can use it. I've put in tracking progress and challenges, just because I feel like it's really important to understand what is necessary to implement OERs at a university, because you know, people have found that student outcomes are as good as better with open content versus traditional materials. So you do want to kind of be able to almost measure the costs of your progress, I mean, of like implementing the OERs, and figure out if this is worth it for the university. And essentially, tracking your progress and challenges will determine the value of the OER work for librarians and help you to allocate your resources and time efficiently. OER does probably take a lot more work than you would imagine, so it's not just an add-on, and I feel like tracking this can demonstrate the effectiveness of these interventions. So I would say, if you want to start implementing OERs at your institution, or track your time and your functions to be able to understand the role of the librarian, so you can figure out how much time you've spent assisting staff, how much time you spent training yourself or your colleagues. You can track work to assess the needs and interests of different faculties. So you would be a center point to this work, and a lot of people, so for example, somebody from the English department is creating OERs, and somebody in a social science department is also creating an OER. You can share the knowledge between them. You might be the center point for this. So I think you'll have a better understanding of the overall needs and interests. So it's useful to track. You should document your outcomes, your successes, and your challenges of your OER efforts. I think this is really important. So if you are assisting anybody else or another librarian, it's not kind of everybody starting from scratch. And then this enables librarians to make OER recommendations based on evidence-based assessments. So you'll have all your evidence, you'll have tracked what your efforts have been, and you can actually make recommendations to your institution. It kind of provides a really important role, and it is kind of a center point for OER work. OER policy and implementation. This is why OER policy is important. From all the things I've pointed out about like the role of librarians, you can actually be champions of the OER policy development, because you would be able to have tracked progress and been kind of a key point for the OER efforts at your institution. You can use policy to scale up OER efforts if you've seen that these interventions are working, and again, that's like key to kind of monitoring your progress. Policy can be aligned with an institutional vision, mission, and values. Important because you want your policy to fit into what your university is doing, and again, the librarian's role here is invaluable. You can review your IP and copyright policy, because now you may be licensing work under Creative Commons licenses, so I think it's important to be involved in this and actually look at what the policies that you have in place do say. This will all help develop a plan to raise awareness for OERs, and then you can also plan the training and any other interventions that may be necessary. And I think one of the very important takeaways is establishing responsibility. So you want to be in a position where you know who is responsible for OERs at a university. Is it one person? Is there going to be a OER coordinator, or is there going to be an OER librarian, or is it the responsibility of everybody on the staff to work on OERs? But policy is going to be able to identify where this is, you know, who is responsible and how you allocate responsibilities. I would point you, if you are looking to develop an OER policy or assistance for developing an OER policy, there's this Lumen Learning OER policy development tool, and it can help you. It gives different options for the purpose of your policy, licensing issues, so what kind of licensing the university wants to adopt, procedures and responsibilities. I've taken a screenshot of it. This is just the purpose section, so they've got 4 options, and you could select and you can find out more about each one. And they've also given a really handy action checklist on each policy point. So this one says review your university vision and mission on how OER aligns with it. So it's really useful to look at this. And I have provided the link at the top, but I've also provided at the end of the presentation. So I think a very important idea around using OERs is developing your, or building your OER community. I think you'll find that you are not the only person who may be struggling with issues. And I kind of feel like this is how we got involved with AfLIA, because people were looking to help with addressing OER issues for librarians. So we know there are people that are working on this, but we don't know who to speak to. And I think it's there are a few places where librarians can start. So first of all, within your university community, you can be vocal about using OERs and open access content. You'll be able to understand the issues, and you can also engage others in it and see if they'd be interested in using it, or what their challenges have been once you kind of explore outside your university. You can build a rapport among OER champions and users, so you can find others across the world or across Africa who are using OER content, and I think AfLIA could be a good start for a lot of librarians. I think you should be honest about the challenges you face, because nobody is not having any challenges. There's, you know, people have different issues and different successes, so it's a good place. I think it's really good to share this. Sharing time and ideas, either with other librarians or with other people working in the OER space, and with your colleagues and faculty. Like I said, I think librarians are this key point to OER, and you can assist with this, and with people understanding great things that can be done, useful things that can be done, or things that possibly don't work in certain circumstances. The online communities and listservs, I've provided a list. It's actually librarians working in OER, and they're mostly based in the US and Canada, but there's some really useful resources that they share, and you can you can get their emails. They've got you know, a lot of great resources, and it's a nice community, because people can send a query out and they'll be open to assisting you. You can contribute to the OER world map, which I'll get to in just a second, and then build the AfLIA OER community. And you can discuss with the AfLIA leadership how to do that, and if that's something you may want to do. I mentioned the OER world map, so there's a link up at the top, and it just shows people that have kind of listed themselves on this as OER practitioners across the world. You can see there's quite a few. A lot of it is in Europe and the US, but there are places in Africa, and there are OER librarians listed here, and they've got contact details. So I think this is a great place if you do want to engage with people and get further ideas. I'm not a librarian, so I think obviously these people maybe have a lot more to share with you, and it could be a good start. And you can also list when you can list yourself on the map and say that you have got content. So it'll direct people to your content. So it's, again, making it discoverable. My last slide is that librarians are fundamental to OER management. I think this is anybody that's considering, any university that is considering adopting OERs needs to know, and librarians particularly. Librarians are kind of the center point for this. I've said it in a few times today. You can establish the processes to manage the content because you're the content curators, essentially. You will be guiding people on where to go, what to look for. You are kind of, providing leadership in this space. You can find ways to support staff, academic staff and students to access and use high quality OERs because you'll know how to search for them. You'll know, you'll be able to guide them on how to check for quality issues. And then librarians you do understand the importance of setting up and implementing appropriate policies. This will be through possibly tracking and, kind of tracking what work you've done and understanding all the issues. We've given you this base with these 3 webinars to be able to understand the licensing, to be able to understand open access journals and what benefits they provide you, the benefits of using OERs in your institutions. And I think that is really important for understanding how to set up policies. And then my last slide is just the useful resources. There's the Creative Commons website, it just lists the licenses, the Finding Open Content tutorial, and I've got information on searching for OERs, rubrics for evaluating OERs, quality assurance rubric, the policy development tool, the WITS LibGuide, a librarian toolbox on open education. SPARC is actually the listserv that I mentioned. It's the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Coalition, and you can join their mailing list and interact with the rest of the community. There's their forum and sign up, and that's actually their website with resources for librarians. There's a lot of webinars on like this one, but others on getting started with OERs that are not just specific to librarians. I've just listed one here. And then there's the links to the OER world map. I have uploaded this presentation onto the OER Africa website, and all of these links are clickable. So you can, you'll be able to find all this content, and I'll share the link shortly. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Sorry,
That's
there was
a marathon.
okay.
That's a marathon one.
Okay, I'm going to stop my video. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Kirsty, for this elaborate and wonderful presentation. My dear participants, you agree with me that it's been wonderful. 13 areas. The last but very important is that librarians are fundamental to OER management. Anybody who undermines librarian will not I know you're there.
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I couldn't hear you for a few minutes.
Kirsty, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Sorry, I couldn't hear you at all.
Okay. So let's take the questions that have been coming in as you were presenting. Let me start with the one on Facebook. The first question by Anna Smith says, can OER policy be part of the existing research policy, or does it start on its own as a policy?
I am not fully up to date on how universities would use, like if they would integrate policy or if they would need new policy, but I think it's up to each institution on its own. I think Tony or Liz could better answer that, so they are welcome to step in and assist me with that question.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. I think, so Tony, it was about having existing policy, if you can kind of write OERs into existing policy, or if you need a whole new policy for it, like an OER specific policy.
Okay, I hope Liz can also add, but I would say that really OER should probably be part of the intellectual property policy of the university, of the institution. So when institutions really should develop IP, intellectual property policies, and OER could be part of that. That's what I would suggest.
Thanks.
I would like to add something as well.
Yes.
Most universities, first of all, I agree with Tony that the place to put policy for both OER and open access would be in the institutions, either the institution's IP policy, or some of them have policies on scholarly research. So the first thing to do is to find out what kinds of IP policies your institution has. And then Kirsty's given you some information about OER policy. Tony and I provided information 2 weeks ago on open access policy. And you'll find that the policies for both OER and open access share many features.
All right. Thank you so very much. Another question coming from Norma Oyudo. It says, just close to my worry too and my concern, how can we contribute to OER world map? That is, how can an African librarian join the OER community in the world?
So I would say if you go onto that OER world map, you can have a look at what the requirements are and who can contribute. The link is there, but also if you just Google OER world map, it comes up, and there are different categories of people that would contribute to the world map. But like I said, I think it's interesting seeing librarians that are working on OERs, and if you are working on that, I think it's a useful place to be seen.
All right. Then another question is, considering the many different instructional design platforms and different resources that each organization requires, how does one go about developing a universal template for training and resource development that can lead to time saving for creating more resources? That is, for creating the universal template for creating OER resources, open educational resources. This question is coming from Marino Sven. I don't know if it is clear to you.
I would ask Liz or Tony to respond to that.
Again, I need some slight clarification, please, of the question, if possible.
Okay. It said, how can one, that there are so many instructional design platforms and different resources that organizations require. How can one go about developing a universal template for training and resource development that can lead to creating a more resources? It is just wobbling, but what I can understand is that it's looking for a way to develop a training manual that will help people understand. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the features of the world that you know, there are always multiple versions of a similar sort of thing. So he's suggesting that there are various learning management systems, and is there a possibility of having a universal one and having overall guidelines? It is a bit difficult to answer that because people work differently in different countries, and what works for one, and they also work differently within the same country. So yeah, I'm not sure I've got a wide enough experience to really give a sort of global answer or continental answer on that, because it's to try and get people to work in the same sort of way is often quite difficult. So I'm afraid to say I don't have a clear solution for that.
Can I just mention, I have shared the link in the chat for all the presentations if anybody wants to access them, everything that's on the OER Africa website.
Okay.
Is that okay? Carry on.
Just like to add a little bit, I was just looking at the Q&As and I saw, is there any universal template or standard for OER? You see, OER are all sorts of so many different things. An image can be an OER. It can be I mean, it's a resource of some sort that's used for educational purposes. So I don't think there would be a way of having a standard or template. Let's take an example. You've got a really good set of activities on let's say, learning about the digestive system for a biologist. You've got a whole load of really good activities for students to learn about those. The best thing would be to have those written in what is relatively a universal thing, which would be probably Microsoft Word or something similar, and then adapt what you've got into the various learning management systems you need. Because, I mean, another one would be having some images that you've created in PowerPoint. The thing is that OER are very different. There are videos, there are images, there are text, all sorts of different types of OER. So the idea of a universal template for OER is I don't think, going to be really possible. But anyway, that's my opinion.
Okay, I think that could be that. Then let me ask a very crucial question. It's sent in by Emmanuel Akko. He said everything said is about the academic library. So how can this policy be implemented at the public libraries and any support?
My focus for this was for academic librarians, but I think it's obviously different for public libraries. Liz and I will be doing a presentation at the AfLIA at the conference later this month. I mean, we can speak to this, but we also, I mean, you can contact either of us for assistance on questions that are not specifically about academic libraries, because I think it might be a bit easier to know specifically what you're looking for and different contexts, because I know obviously libraries across different countries would have different requirements and like kind of different capability for dealing with this.
All right, take this one. It said, aside advocacy, how can librarians push for the adoption and acceptance of open resources in a country where universities' governing board is skeptical and speaks against it?
So, I mean, what I tried to cover in my presentation were ways of dealing with the concerns that maybe governing bodies, governing boards, or the institutions may have about using OERs, about the concerns of faculty. I don't expect that somebody can walk in and just say that we're going to be using OERs, obviously. So what I've done is kind of try to provide links and encourage people to get involved in their community, in OER communities, so they are able to see what others are doing, and speak to people about how they got over these challenges, because I don't think there's any 1-hour webinar in the world that could kind of tackle like the bureaucratic challenges that you might be facing. I hope that's accurate. I don't know if Liz and Tony want to add anything on that.
Okay. There is this one that says, how do we know who is doing what to track them? That is preparing OER, since people are working from different faculties. I don't know if you understand this question. This person is asking. Yes, okay.
So my answer, and Liz and Tony also may answer differently, would be that I would encourage the librarian to engage with faculty on these issues, so that the librarian can maybe that's the point about creating the policy and kind of establishing responsibility for that, because you're not going to be able to guess who's doing what, or know that somebody's doing something if this is not a topic that is being discussed at your institution. So I would say, like, librarians can situate themselves at the center of that and establish the processes and be able to kind of curate the content that is being created in the institution.
Okay. Okay, I think that this could be the last. It says, what are the time and resource requirements for creating open content as compared to priority databases who offer immediate access to content? That is the time concern. This person is looking at the time concern, yes.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And that was part of my point about tracking the work. So librarians are not going to be creating OERs, but like I said, students and faculty could be creating content, and it depends what people want to create on how long it's going to be. So some people will be converting a whole course to an OER, and that obviously takes a lot of work and needs, people need to understand what they're doing. They need to understand exactly what they want to get out of it, get out of actually, why you want to convert to an OER versus like carrying on your course the same way and using OERs as kind of resources to assist you in that course. So it's one of those things that somebody needs to do to be able to see how it works. There's no hard and fast rule, because it'll also be very different for different faculties. So I would say for example, in a lot of the sciences, there may be a lot of content available, whereas in, I don't know, maybe like literature, there may not be a lot of OERs just because of the nature of the subject. Yeah, so there's I can't give a kind of strict time definition, but I did say it's kind of one of those things that people don't really account for how long these things can take. And that's why I think it's important to track it and share this information with other people.
All right. I think this person is looking at the MOOCs. That is multiple courses. He said, if anyone, which OER is actually the resources they use, he says, if anyone contributes, how does one ensure uniform quality standards across board? how does one also eliminate overlap of some information between different free courses? That is looking at free courses now. It's gone beyond the resources to go to the courses. When there is overlap or differences in the courses, course content.
I think that this comes down to searching for OERs and for courses. And so essentially before you start creating content, seeing what's out there, seeing what you can use. And that's kind of what I want people to be able to almost experiment with, like have a look at what is available, try the searches, see what there is, see what you can use, possibly in order to save time and not repeating courses that are already created or content that exists. I think that may be helpful for you. And then when it comes to quality standards, like I said, there are repositories and spaces that do quality assure content. There are ways of checking the quality, like using one of those rubrics to be able to know what to look out for. But I think if an academic wants to be using an OER, so Liz and Tony dealt extensively with quality when it comes to open access journals. So I think that is a useful place to look if they refer, if you refer to the content they discussed when it comes to open access and research content. But I would say if people want to be using OERs, it comes down to reviewing the content and checking that the standards meet what you're looking for your purposes.
All right. I think we thank you, Kirsty, for so much elaborate telling us what we need to do.
I hope it was helpful.
Yes. Hello, I can hear you.
Oh, sorry, hello? I said I was just saying I hope it was helpful, and I just wanted to say one more thing, if you don't mind.
All right, go ahead, please.
It's kind of two things. Like I said, Liz and I will be at the AfLIA conference. We're doing a presentation on the 22nd of May. It's on OER and open access for librarians. Come and ask us all your questions. We'd be happy to help out where we can or point you in the right direction. Okay. And then Neil is also going to be Neil Butcher of Neil Butcher and Associates. He did the first webinar. He's going to be the keynote speaker at the conference in Nairobi. And I think that the keynote, the opening ceremony and presentations are on the 21st of May. So it would be great if you are there, if you do attend those sessions.
Okay. I think we still have some time to look at some of more questions. This person is asking, employers usually want to see some kind of plan and policy in place without actually providing a template policy or even guidance on a policy in the format they require, so that the person can find and provide them with the correct format. Barbara, it is myself make it very difficult to make any time out implementation of any kind of policy in the library, as everything within the organization is more important than the running and development of the library. Unless the library is under review, this person is not asking a question. He's just trying to say that they're expecting so much without giving you a way out of it. Another question, on the college level, I believe that the research and OER policy is separate, although you can have addition to each policy alluding to the other. Is it possible, that is, you have pockets of policies? I think the best is to have a single policy, is it?
I think what Tony said earlier about having your OER policy as part of your intellectual property policy is might be a good start. But like I said, I think it's different for every organization. Tony, is that right?
Okay.
It is. And I just want to add that if you're looking for policy policies, there are some examples on the OER Africa website. And if you just go to the main site and type in policy or policies in the search engine within the site, you will get some examples of policies that you could either adapt or adapt. You wouldn't want to use them obviously as they are, but they might assist in developing policies, because I know there was at least 2 questions on that. I'll type in the website address onto the Q&A.
Thanks, Tony. There is also, like I said, that the Lumen Learning OER policy development tool that gives you, it's obviously they've looked at lots of different policies that have been developed, and you can almost select what suits your institution and use that as the kind of outline or templates for developing a policy. And that the WITS LibGuide on OER also provides some policy and guidelines, so you can have a look at what has been done maybe by other organizations.
All right, thank you very much. This one is how does one train librarians in South Africa when no special librarian trainer are available? As far as I know, only facilitators are always called in for training purposes, and some of those facilitators don't have extensive knowledge or awareness of the course being presented. How can one handle this? It's a bureaucratic issue. And do you have any answer to this?
Yeah, I kind of think we're providing kind of a stepping stone for training librarians. So it's maybe not a case of training librarians, but librarians kind of learning about these issues, like everybody kind of here has almost taken upon themselves to learn about it, to join this webinar. I think it's also that there's no one way of doing everything. So for me, it's, you know, people just understanding the issues and being able to kind of like work with OERs because they've got an understanding of what they're for, and sharing this information. I hope that's useful. There was one. Oh, somebody asked about the components of OER policy.
Yes.
And I think important components would be like who is responsible, and these are all on that Lumen Learning OER policy development tool. It's kind of, I mentioned it on one of the pages. So they've got the purpose, licensing issues, and that's intellectual property issues, the procedures and the responsibilities. I think those would be the biggest things that you would need to include in an OER policy.
All right. The printing of OERs tend to be pricey, especially if it needs to distribute to many people. Providing links or having it in one central place is what most academics tend to want. Having a single directory may work, but only if only one person at a time wants to use it. I think Ntabisi can answer this. She indicated interest. I think so. Is she on?
I can help with that because I've had exchanges with Marinas. Printing OER is expensive. Printing anything is expensive. There are a few things that can be done in larger institutions. Most universities and colleges have an intranet. If you have an OER or open access resource that you know will be wanted by many users at your institution, you can mount it on the intranet, and anyone who has a computer can go to the intranet and read it either on his or her device. Another possibility is to print out one copy of the resource or 2 copies of the resource and putting it in the reserve collection. so that anyone who wants to read the resource can borrow it for a short period of time, perhaps overnight. These are traditional things that librarians have always done with print materials.
All right. Can anybody add anything? Is there anything you can add? Okay, thank you, and Tabitha. We thank you very much, Kirsty, for the elaborate presentation and the responses. We also use the opportunity to thank all those who made it possible for us to have a successful webinar from the first one. We want to thank Stanley and Michael for their technical support. We thank the resource persons, Neboche, Intabisen, Lisbeth, Tony, Kadu, Chrissy. I also have to thank myself. And also to all the participants, we thank you for being part of this knowledge sharing, drinking from the river of knowledge. We believe that you will serve as the apostle of OER in your respective institutions. Please note that the recordings of the 3 sections will be available on AfLIA YouTube, and the presentations will be compiled and sent to all the participants. You will receive evaluation forms to enable us to serve you better in future. And you please know that those who were able to participate in the webinar, 2 out of it, 2 at least, not less than 2, we receive a certificate of participation. We thank you and we urge you. We are eager to know because we are crucial. We are the focal point as far as OER is concerned. Attend, participate in the 5th African Librarian Summit, AfLIA Summit, and the 3rd conference in Kenya to get more knowledge concerning OER. I thank you and I say, God bless you. Watch out for future webinar that we continue to reveal what we need to know, what we need to do, and how we need to do it. Thank you so very much.